Life has a way of showing us that sometimes the most painful moments can open doors to unexpected blessings. That fateful day, my father's car pulled up to my aunt's house, and I had no idea my life was about to change forever. "Look, this is your new home now," he said with an unsettling cheerfulness that made my stomach turn. The words that followed hit me like a punch to the gut. They no longer wanted a sick child in their home. I sat there, frozen, as my father callously explained that they needed my medical expenses to fund my sister's study abroad program. The world seemed to spin around me as I tried to process this betrayal from my own parents. For days, I existed in a fog of disbelief and heartache, unable to form words or even comprehend what had happened to me. But in that darkness, my aunt became my beacon of hope. She welcomed me with such warmth that it brought tears to my eyes, the kind of maternal love I had desperately yearned for all those years. I'll never forget the moment she gently took my trembling hands in hers and asked if I would like to become her daughter. That simple question held more love than I had experienced in years with my biological parents. That day marked the beginning of my new life as my aunt and uncle's daughter. Now, 10 years later, I look back at that moment as the day I was truly born into the family I was meant to have. My name is Lindsay, and I have two families in my life. One I consider to be the worst imaginable, while the other I deeply respect and cherish with all my heart. You might wonder why I have two families, and the answer lies in how my illness complicated our family bonds in ways I never could have imagined. From my earliest memories, I suffered from unexplainable seizures that required constant vigilance. Although medication helped control the symptoms to some extent, stress and fatigue could easily trigger an attack, leading my parents to strictly forbid any physical activity. I became the eternal spectator in PE classes, watching from the sidelines as other children played freely, a loneliness that still echoes in my memories. My sister Amelia, for years younger than me, was everything I couldn't be: a vibrant, talented, and the perfect embodiment of our parents' expectations. As she grew, volleyball became her passion, consuming her every free moment. She joined a prestigious local mini volleyball club in elementary school, where her natural talent began to flourish like a flower in spring. Later, she advanced to an elite sports club, where her skills improved dramatically, earning her a regular position on the team. She emerged as a natural leader, competing fiercely with older players and commanding respect on the court. I felt proud watching her practice, though I couldn't ignore the twinge of envy that pierced my heart. It was around this time that our parents began to make stark distinctions in how they treated Amelia and me. The difference was most apparent at mealtimes. Amelia received carefully prepared, nutritious homemade meals, while I was given merely plain bread and instant soup. Sometimes, I would quietly eat Amelia's leftovers, feeling like an afterthought in my own home. The disparity extended to our clothing. Amelia wore fashionable children's outfits, while I received hand-me-downs even for birthdays, Christmas, and school events. While Amelia basked in special treatment, I often felt invisible, like a shadow in our family portrait. This discriminatory treatment became as routine as breathing in our household. I remember how Amelia would often approach me, her eyes sparkling with innocent joy, clutching her volleyball and asking if I wanted to play with her. I would reluctantly decline, explaining that I couldn't engage in strenuous activity. She would look up at the sky thoughtfully, then suddenly break into a smile, suggesting that we could at least pass the ball back and forth, holding out the volleyball to me, with hope in her eyes. I thought passing the ball might be safe enough, but my parents strongly disagreed. My mother, in particular, violently swatted my hand away when I reached for the volleyball, her voice rising to a terrifying pitch. She screamed that I could have a seizure at any moment, so I wasn't allowed to do anything at all. Amelia froze in shock at our mother's outburst, and the volleyball fell from her hands, rolling slowly across the floor like my shattered hopes. Then, as if nothing had happened, our mother picked up the ball, handed it back to Amelia with a warm smile, and suggested they practice passing together. After giving me one last cold glance, she walked away with my sister, speaking to her in the gentle tone I longed to hear. When they left, I sat alone, tears streaming down my face as waves of deep sadness and bitter frustration washed over me. One of the most painful memories occurred when I was in 7th grade, and Amelia was in 3rd grade. On that spring morning, I had woken up feeling terribly ill and had to stay in bed. My parents left me alone at home to watch Amelia's important volleyball game. I remember thinking how seizures always seemed to strike when I was at my weakest. The combination of being sick and completely alone filled me with mounting anxiety, and the stress triggered a severe seizure around noon. Sensing the danger, I managed to call an ambulance before losing consciousness. When I came to, I found myself in a hospital bed, the sterile white ceiling above me. Just as I opened my eyes, a nurse who was changing my IV noticed me and offered a kind smile. She asked if I knew where I was, and I nodded weakly in response. I carefully scanned the room, but there was no sign of my family anywhere. When I asked about my family, my voice trembling with hope and fear, the nurse's expression softened. She explained that they wouldn't be coming until tomorrow morning, leaving me alone for the night. This confirmed what I already knew: my parents and sister were still away at the volleyball tournament, too busy to care about their convulsing daughter. As the reality sank in that no one had come even though I'd been taken away in an ambulance, I told myself what I'd always known: I wasn't really a family member, just a burden they had to bear. My vision blurred as tears welled up in my eyes, the weight of my loneliness crushing my chest. I pulled the blanket over my head and wept silently in that sterile hospital room. After the ambulance incident, and facing harsh criticism from neighbors, my parents started leaving me at my aunt's house, my father's sister, who became my sanctuary. My aunt and uncle worked at a video game development company, and since they had no children of their own, they always welcomed me with genuine joy that warmed my heart. Every week, my aunt would tell me how having me around made her feel like she finally had the child she'd always dreamed of. They shared their passion for gaming with me, teaching me about their favorite games, and I found myself eagerly looking forward to each visit. I was particularly captivated by a game they had developed together, a beautiful fantasy world where I could lose myself for hours, forgetting all my troubles. They always served me the same meals they ate, and my aunt's cooking was so wonderful that I often asked for seconds, feeling truly part of their family. My aunt would beam with joy while picking out clothes for me, telling me how she had always dreamed of dressing a child of her own. These visits to my aunt's house became my emotional anchor, making me feel valued and loved for the first time in years. One day, as summer vacation approached near the end of my 7th grade, my father drove me to my aunt's house. The car was packed full of luggage, and my heart fluttered with excitement at the thought of spending summer vacation there. After unloading the bags, my father walked into the house with an unusually cheerful demeanor that felt odd, while my aunt wore a worried expression that made my stomach knot. Something felt different in the air that day, and anxiety began creeping into my chest. But given my strained relationship with my father, I couldn't bring myself to ask what was wrong. While I was still trying to make sense of the situation, my father spread his arms wide and made his shocking announcement. He declared that this would be my new home from then on. Then came the cruel truth: they no longer wanted a sick child in their household. I stood there frozen, stunned by his words, while he maintained that eerily cheerful tone. Despite my aunt and other relatives' angry protests, my parents remained deaf to their objections. All they could think about was Amelia's overseas volleyball scholarship, as if that justified everything. My father's cold words still echo in my ears. He would stop paying for my medical treatment to fund my sister's study abroad program. No matter how much my aunt and uncle tried to reason with my parents, their pleas fell on deaf ears, like whispers in a storm. My aunt stood firm, her voice unwavering as she declared she would take me in if they stopped my treatment. To my shock and heartbreak, my parents accepted her offer without a moment's hesitation, as if they had been waiting for this chance. In that moment, the brutal truth hit me like a physical blow. My parents were willing to simply hand me over, to discard me like an unwanted possession. As I sat there, speechless and trembling with disbelief, my aunt gently approached me with compassion in her eyes. She explained that my father had claimed I wanted to leave home. She told me she had agreed to take me in based on that claim, but seeing my reaction now, she realized I had been kept in the dark about everything. With genuine concern, she suggested there was still time to discuss things properly with my parents. She assured me we could still work things out if I wanted to try. But in my heart, I knew it was too late to repair the relationship with my parents. Some wounds run too deep to heal. I couldn't think of them as family anymore, not after this final betrayal. Looking into my aunt's kind eyes, I shook my head vigorously, fighting back tears. My voice trembled as I begged her to let me stay, promising I wouldn't be a burden. I pledged to help with housework and do whatever was needed, my words tumbling out in desperate hope. Rising slowly to my feet, I continued my heartfelt plea. With tears streaming down my face, I told her I had nowhere else to go if they turned me away. My voice shaking with emotion, I repeated my desperate request to live with them. I could see the uncertainty passing between my aunt and uncle, and my whole body trembled with fear as I waited for their response, feeling like my entire future hung in the balance. Then my aunt reached out and gently stroked my head, her touch full of maternal warmth I had never known from my own mother. My aunt asked me, the most beautiful question I'd ever heard, if I would like to become their daughter. Looking up through my tears, I saw my aunt and uncle smiling down at me, with such warmth that it melted away years of pain. Through my tears of relief, I managed to whisper, "Yes, please," feeling for the first time that I truly belonged somewhere. My aunt embraced me tightly, her own tears falling freely, while my uncle watched us with misty eyes, quietly wiping away his own tears. That day marked the beginning of my new life as their daughter, and soon after, we completed the special adoption procedures that legally made me their child. With their loving support, I was finally able to participate actively in PE classes and enjoy playing with friends, simple joys I'd never known before. My health improved dramatically, and my seizures became increasingly rare, like storm clouds gradually clearing from my sky. Living with my aunt and uncle filled me with a happiness I never thought possible, a feeling of finally being home. Despite the lingering risk of seizures, I began participating in trading card game tournaments, discovering a passion that would change my life. Instead of holding me back, my aunt and uncle encouraged me to pursue this new interest, helping me focus on the competitions while ensuring my safety. A deep desire grew in my heart to somehow repay their boundless kindness and faith in me. Upon entering junior high school, I joined the trading card club, taking my first step toward that goal. Our school's card club was well known in the competitive gaming world, a reputation that both excited and challenged me. The stimulating environment helped me grow and develop, and I felt a thrill of joy at finally being able to show my true capabilities. In my second year of junior high, I achieved what seemed impossible, winning the national championship by defeating several prestigious schools. I couldn't contain my excitement as I ran home that day, bursting through the door to share the good news with my aunt and uncle. By then, my illness had almost completely disappeared, like a shadow retreating before the dawn. Before graduating junior high school, my doctor confirmed what seemed miraculous. I was completely cured and as healthy as my sister. After graduation, I continued competing in card games, always supported by my aunt and uncle's unwavering encouragement. Every victory I achieved brought them as much joy as if it were their own, their pride in me evident in their beaming faces. By the time I turned 20, I had established myself As a consistent winner, and now at 22, I'm known as an elite player, the Queen of Cards. 10 years had passed since my aunt and uncle took me in, changing my life forever. As Christmas approached, I found myself thinking it was finally time to show them my gratitude in some meaningful way. The crisp winter air nipped at my cheeks as I walked home, my mind busy planning something special for the two people who had become my true parents. When I reached our house, I noticed unfamiliar shoes at the entrance, making my heart skip a beat. I called out my usual, "I'm home," while asking if we had visitors. In our living room, I found a middle school girl sitting on the sofa, with my aunt standing nearby to greet me. My aunt welcomed me home with her usual warmth. "Who is this?" I asked instinctively, though something about the girl seemed hauntingly familiar. When my aunt told me it was Amelia, I could barely recognize the voice of the little sister I'd left behind. She'd grown so much. Yet beneath the changes, I could still see traces of the innocent child I remembered. When I spoke her name, her face crumpled as she burst into tears. Through her sobs, she told me how happy she was that I remembered her, her voice thick with emotion. I stood there awkwardly, unsure how to respond, asking what had brought her here. My aunt quietly explained that Amelia had run away from home. I stared at my sister in shock, barely able to process this unexpected turn of events. Amelia, wiping away tears with trembling hands, pleaded for my help, her voice quavering. Then she began to tell her story, each word heavy with pain. It seemed my forced departure had left deep scars on her young heart. She described how she had begged our parents through her tears, her voice breaking as she recalled those moments. My chest tightened as I learned how she had pleaded with them not to send me away. She even offered to quit volleyball in exchange. But our father's harsh rebuke cut through the air like a knife, insisting that everything they had done was for her volleyball career. He demanded to know what nonsense she was talking about, declaring that half measures weren't acceptable and refusing to let her quit. Our mother, her voice carrying an eerie tone that still haunts me, dismissed Amelia's pleas by reminding her that she was her only child who needed to become a distinguished athlete. From early childhood through high school, our parents had maintained an iron grip on Amelia's life, forcing her into a volleyball-centered existence against her will. During a career counseling session, Amelia finally found the courage to declare her wish to leave volleyball behind. Our parents exploded with rage, and father's terrifying voice bore down on her like a thunderstorm. He demanded to know if she understood how much money they had invested in her. He wielded my sacrifice as a weapon, throwing it in her face. He declared that quitting wasn't an option until she turned professional. Under this crushing psychological pressure, Amelia had fled to our aunt's house, seeking escape from their suffocating control. I sat there speechless, the weight of this revelation crushing my heart. I had no idea what she had been going through. While I had found freedom and love in our aunt and uncle's home, my sister had become our parents' sacrificial lamb. My voice trembled as I acknowledged how difficult it must have been for her. When I apologized for not knowing about her struggles, Amelia quickly shook her head in protest. With downcast eyes, she whispered that I had suffered far worse, and she felt guilty for asking for my help now. Her small shoulders trembled with emotion, making her look so young and vulnerable. I responded with warmth and reassurance, telling her how truly happy I was that she had come to us. Our aunt and uncle nodded in agreement, their faces full of understanding and support. I told Amelia how brave she was to escape from them, encouraging her to relax and assuring her that her big sister would protect her now. Though my heart trembled with fear and hesitation about getting involved, I knew I had to help my sister, and I began forming a plan in my mind. Christmas Day was chosen for executing my plan, a decision that felt both fitting and terrifying. Under a heavy winter sky threatening snow, I returned to my childhood home for the first time in 10 years, the cold air matching the chill in my heart. When I finally gathered the courage to ring the doorbell, the door flew open with alarming enthusiasm, and my father greeted me with exaggerated warmth, telling me how long they had been waiting. My parents welcomed me with unnaturally bright smiles that never reached their eyes. They must have known about my return through my aunt, and I was certain they understood this was about Amelia's overseas volleyball scholarship. My mother echoed the welcome, her voice dripping with false sweetness. I confronted them immediately, asking how they could act this way, after throwing me out like unwanted baggage. My mother's voice cracked as she took my hand, trying to usher me inside from the cold. I replied curtly that I wouldn't be staying long, as I was busy. Their faces clouded over for a moment before they forced their smiles back into place, like masks sliding over their true feelings. Then they began speaking in unnaturally loud voices, as if performing for an invisible audience. My mother launched into a speech about how I was now the queen of card games. She declared how proud my father was of me. She included herself in that pride. She went on about how much prize money I must be earning. She boasted about telling all the neighbors about my success. She finished by urging me to come back home soon. I felt my irritation rising at their transparent act, but managed to maintain my composure as I responded. I asked them why they kept talking about family, my voice trembling with barely contained anger. When they had the audacity to say that families should stay together, my father eagerly agreeing, I felt a chill run down my spine. I stared at them, in utter disbelief, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and rage at their hypocrisy. Inside my head, I screamed at the absurdity of them talking about family, after throwing me away like yesterday's newspaper. They continued their performance, deliberately ignoring my obvious distress, their voices dripping with artificial sweetness. My mother chirped about how she had cleaned my old room, as if erasing 10 years of abandonment with a dust cloth. She went on about how I could take my time settling in, her words as hollow as an empty shell. They even bragged about installing new carpeting to make it easier for me to practice my card games, as if that could make up for everything. They kept insisting I should ask for anything I needed, their voices growing more desperate with each offer. The words piled up like autumn leaves as they tried desperately to win my favor. In that moment, everything became crystal clear to me, like a fog suddenly lifting. These people weren't talking about the real me at all, they were just putting on a show for the neighbors, like actors in a poorly written play. They had been spreading stories throughout the neighborhood about my success as a top-level card game player, fabricating tales about how they had supported me all along. Even sending Amelia to study volleyball abroad was just another prop in their carefully constructed facade. I watched them with a bitter smile, seeing through their desperate performance like a thin curtain. Their selfish efforts were not only shameful but completely meaningless, like trying to catch smoke with bare hands. I decided to burst their bubble by calmly announcing that I plan to retire from competitive card gaming in a few years. The shock on their faces was like a photograph frozen in time. My father stood speechless while my mother's jaw dropped in horror. I explained cheerfully that competitive card gaming required quick reflexes, concentration, and stamina, making it impossible to compete against younger players forever. I added brightly that I planned to retire after earning just a bit more prize money. I could see the panic setting in as their carefully constructed plans began crumbling before their eyes. My father asked what I planned to do after retirement, his voice sharp with disapproval. I smiled sweetly and told him I might be unemployed for a while, watching their reactions carefully. Their false smiles vanished like morning mist at my words. My father's face turned red with anger as he shouted about how ridiculous this was. He ranted about how I would bring shame to them in society without a proper job, his voice trembling with rage. With a calm I didn't know I possessed, I told them they should just forget about me. I added that I had never intended to return to this house anyway, each word measured and clear. My father's angry shout of, "How dare you!" echoed through the quiet neighborhood like a thunderclap. My mother, ever conscious of appearances, frantically looked around for watching neighbors, panic written across her face. I explained that I had come today to discuss Amelia's situation. I informed them that she was now living healthily with me at our aunt's house. My mother's face contorted as she suddenly played the victim, asking if I had kidnapped my sister. I met her gaze steadily, my voice firm and unwavering. I declared that I had no intention of returning Amelia to them. I emphasized that point with absolute certainty. I told them I would take care of my sister myself. They threatened to call the police, their voices shaking with barely controlled anger. I observed them calmly, my response measured and prepared. I informed them firmly that I had already reported everything to the police and Child Protective Services. I added that I had consulted with lawyers about the situation. With steel in my voice, I told them that they were the ones breaking the law. They stammered in disbelief, asking what I meant. I explained that I had taken every precaution to protect my sister, consulting multiple experts about potential kidnapping charges. I had thoroughly researched all the legal regulations surrounding our situation. I pointed out that Amelia was legally an adult now, and at 18, she had the right to decide where she wanted to live. I emphasized that she had left their home of her own free will to escape their toxic influence, and there was nothing illegal about her choosing to live with her sister. Armed with these facts, I faced my parents with newfound confidence, drawing them deeper into this crucial conversation. I declared that staying with them would only bring more unhappiness to both of us. My voice rising with emotion, I told them we were not trophies to be displayed for their vanity. From the corner of my eye, I noticed neighbors beginning to gather, drawn by the commotion. They had probably come to investigate the disturbance, curious about what was happening. Seeing this as my opportunity, I decided to lay everything bare. I raised my voice deliberately, announcing that these people had stopped my medical treatment just so they could send my sister to study volleyball abroad. I called out the absurdity of the situation, my voice carrying across the quiet street. My voice cracking with emotion, I shouted that if it hadn't been for my aunt and uncle taking me in, I might not even be alive today. I ignored my mother's agitated protests and raised my voice even louder, determined to make them understand. I accused them of forcing Amelia into volleyball solely for their own pride, sacrificing her childhood in the process. When my father's face turned red with rage and he reached out to grab me, I knocked his hand away and continued my fierce confrontation. I demanded to know what kind of parents they really were. Their refusal to let us quit until we became professionals showed they saw their children as nothing but tools for their ambition. I declared firmly that neither my sister nor I would ever return to this house. I warned them that if they tried to interfere, I would call the police. I made it clear that I had already prepared for legal action. That was the real reason for my visit today. I fixed them with a hard stare, my eyes conveying years of pent-up hurt and determination. They squirmed uncomfortably, glancing around as they struggled to find a response to their public unmasking. I noticed numerous neighbors watching our intense family confrontation from their windows and gardens. Their faces showed a mixture of shock and concern at the scene unfolding before them. With a silent vow never to return to this place, I walked away from that house with my head held high. 8 years passed, and at the milestone age of 30, I made the decision to retire from competitive card gaming. Though I had originally planned to retire at 25, I had put those plans on hold to prioritize caring for my sister. Due to the harsh training during her childhood, Amelia had suffered a knee injury, which ultimately led her to discover a new goal: becoming a physical therapist. She had once dreamed of becoming a professional volleyball player, but her injury forced her to abandon that path. After spending a year in preparatory school, Amelia finally enrolled in a specialized vocational school. During this time, I came to fully understand how much she had suffered under our parents, facing the harsh reality only when she came to me for help. To make amends for her past, I decided to support her education financially. Eventually, Amelia graduated from vocational school and earned her certification as a physical therapist. She now dedicates herself completely to supporting athletes, finding her true calling in helping others heal. Every time we meet, she brightly promises to repay me someday, her face glowing with happiness and purpose. I always smile and tell her she's already repaid me many times over, feeling immense pride as I watch my sister work tirelessly to support so many athletes. Our lives have transformed dramatically since those dark days. After retiring from competitive card gaming, I chose to follow my aunt and uncle's footsteps into game development, feeling it was time to shape the passion they had nurtured in me. I've been working at their company for 3 years now, leading a team developing educational games for children. My goal is to create games that even children with disabilities can enjoy, drawing from my strategic thinking skills from competitive gaming and my own experiences with illness. I haven't seen our biological parents since that day at their house. Through neighborhood gossip, I've heard that our father took early retirement and moved to another town with our mother, unable to face what they called our shameful behavior. Strangely, I no longer feel anger towards them. Instead, I've come to realize that those experiences made us stronger and helped us find our true selves. Recently, my aunt and uncle have started making playful comments about grandchildren. The truth is, I've been dating a wonderful person from the gaming industry for a year now. He's accepted everything about me, my medical history, my complicated family situation, without hesitation. Next month, he'll formally meet my aunt and uncle as my future husband. Amelia, too, has found her path to happiness. She's engaged to a young volleyball player she met at her rehabilitation facility, ready to build her own family. When she talks about teaching her future children what real love means, her profile shows no trace of the shadows that once darkened her life. The other day, we took a family photo for my aunt and uncle's anniversary. Looking at the picture, my aunt said how grateful she was for deciding to take me in that day, never imagining it would bring such happiness to their lives. My uncle nodded silently, his eyes filled with emotion. We've learned through experience that blood ties alone don't make a family. True love means wanting another's happiness and supporting them to live authentically, without expecting anything in return. Now, as soft spring sunlight streams through my window, my illness feels like a distant memory. Yet, I realize that without it, I might never have found my real family. Though challenges surely lie ahead, I no longer fear them. After all, we have something more precious than anything, a genuine family that believes in and supports each other unconditionally.